Welcome back to Faith Infused Leadership. I am your co-host, Meredith Banka, here with our host, Debbie Heiser, who's also the founder of Three Vines Consulting. How are you, Debbie?
I'm fantastic. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, it's an early one. We said that already today, and I'm really looking forward to the topic because today we're going to be talking about the idea of taking stock of really where are we at this point in the year. I mean, today is the middle of August, right? It's the 22nd. I know we're publishing this episode here in a couple of weeks, but either way, there's a good chunk of 2019 left, and we're also starting to look forward to 2020. So what are your thoughts on how people can really get the most out of the remainder of 2019 and also start to plan for a fantastic 2020?
Yeah, Meredith, one of the things that as we look at this, you're right, we're taping in August. By the time you are listening to this, it should be around the first part of October. So really there's about 90 days left in 2019. And a lot of times you'll hear people say in the middle of the year, take stock of where you're at 6 months into the year. And it's interesting. I've talked about Rachel Hollis a couple of different times, and, some people love her, some people don't. But I love this concept that she has about making the last 90 days of the year a power 90 days. Mm-hmm. And so really taking a look at, and if you didn't set goals at the beginning of the year, that's okay too. I'm about trying to live in the present, but you also have to have a roadmap. For instance, I'm heading to Canada this weekend for some advanced training. I have no idea how I'm going to get there, like I do, because I looked at my Siri map, and the couple that I'm going to see has given me some direction, but and you even gave me a little direction about crossing the border. And so, I've got some direction, but I wouldn't be able to get there if I didn't have at least somewhat of an idea of how to get there. And I didn't have it mapped out in my Siri. Although Siri hates me, so sometimes I kind of check not the map is correct. But when you do that, that's what I'm talking about, having a map of where you want to go, because we've talked before about how you have this desire drop in and this need or this want in your life, but you have to be able to create some outer game plans and some inner game plans and realize when you're going to self-sabotage and all those kind of things. But ultimately, you have to have a little bit of a roadmap to get there. It doesn't mean you can't take a side street and go off the main drag, but it's really about looking at that. And so what I'm suggesting is that in the rest of 2019, really take stock of that and have that be a starting point for 2020. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of times people will be like, oh, it's the end of the year, I'm not going to do that, I'm just going to kind of let it go. Well, no, like this is the last 90 days of the year, make it count. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today, is kind of how you want to leave the year of 2019 and move into 2020.
Mm-hmm. I think of the last quarter of the year as like the zero quarter of the next year. Yeah. So, you've got Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, like it's Q0.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the foundation.
Yeah. If you're sitting down to write your goals and your plans on, January 8th, you've missed the setup, right? you kind of missed the setup part. And I love that concept too, that Rachel Hollis is bringing forward of, hey, maximize these 90 days. Mm-hmm. I think people though have a hard time thinking beyond the 90, thinking to those bigger picture goals. So how do you help clients really break down the goal setting process? Do you have some tips you could give us there?
Yeah, I've talked a little bit about this in the past, where you really have to check your why, and ask yourself why numerous times. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And it is way okay if those change. Mm-hmm. When you're in the life cycle of starting a business, the why behind why you're starting that business might look very different than if you're 20 years into owning that business. Mm-hmm. Some of the core basics of why you did it are going to still be there, but it's going to change over time. So really take stock of that. Take a look at those value characteristics that you want to make sure that you're imparting. I remember when I started as a leader, I had like 20 things that were like my rock solid, not wavering,
That's quite a list.
I'm going to share another story here in a minute about how silly I am. And, but realistically, it's gotten down to just two things. And one is honesty and integrity, kind of that characteristic piece of it. And the second one is hire the right person for the right job.
Yes.
Get them in their fit, which is why I do what I do. And so part of it is around looking at those values and just reevaluating and saying, is this still kind of the direction I'm heading? And then when you look at those values, you look at what your bigger purpose is. I've talked about selling yellow pages in the past, and I wasn't selling yellow pages, but I was helping people achieve their hopes, wishes, and dreams. And kind of the same thing today. But what I help people do is really awaken them their best self and move forward into what they're called to do, what their life mission is, their bigger purpose in life. And sometimes that manifests itself in a business, sometimes it manifests itself of being part of an organization, and it just varies. So really taking a look at what that bigger picture is, because that's what's going to drive you. That's what's going to motivate you when some of these other little small desires get in the way, right? And try to squirrel you off path. So really taking some time to reevaluate that piece of it, and then look at what are those big chunks that are important to you. You know, for me, I actually just got turned on to this new planner. I used to use this passion planner, and I still do for 2019. But it didn't really have a great goal setting piece of it. And I'm not getting paid by the law of attraction here, but I found this through a friend of mine, and it's a great planner. It's a paper one. They haven't gone electronic yet, but I haven't gone away from my paper. And they really have broken it down into some segments that I really like. And so I'm using that for my last 90 days, as well as 2020. I don't know if you can see on my door back there, there's something on the door, and it's on the other side. And that's actually my flip chart that I'm writing down some of my goals already for the end of 2019 and for 2020. So that every morning when I walk in my office, I see what they are.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so it's important, I think, to figure out what those big chunks are. You know, for me, it's about relationship. It's about my spirituality, you know, and staying connected to God, but also making a difference in the world. It's about my career and my vocation. It's about financial goals that I have, and kind of that self-development and free time piece of it too. So I really like that binder because it helps you kind of break those down, but you don't have to have that planner to figure it out. But before you ask me another question, this is so key that I want to talk about, because it's so important. I think it maps to what I believe about business planning too, that you don't want a 200-page document that you're not going to complete.
Yes.
It needs to be realistic. And the reason I say that is I'm going to share a story about how silly I am. Well, this is it. Newsflash. So at the beginning of each year, I used to have all these New Year's resolutions. And I'm over exaggerating a little, but I used to have single space, double side goals. Like, these are the things I want to accomplish. I want to learn Spanish. I want to play the guitar. I want to do, you know, and my husband one day looked at me and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, these are my New Year's resolutions. It's what I want to accomplish in a year." And he looked at it and he goes, "You are setting yourself up for failure before you even begin." Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all about setting high expectations. When it's not achievable, you have already set yourself up for failure. So it's really important. Pick one or two things for each of those big rocks that you want to make a priority. You know, one of my priorities under relationship is building a relationship now, not just with my son as a single unit, but now as a family, as he and his new wife are together. And how does that work in my life, and how do I cultivate that relationship? And so you don't have to have 6 things under each deal, I guess is what I'm talking about. Just
and also have realistic goals. I mean, I think in particular from my corporate background, if you're working in an environment where you feel as if the goal is imposed upon you, then you're not connected to it. And I know there are corporations and small businesses alike who really get goal planning correct. But like everything else, there are companies of all shapes and sizes who don't. And I've had experiences where goals were more like mandates than they were creatively or developed with some level of inspiration. And I think that relates to what you're saying of setting yourself up for failure. You know, if you have a goal that's imposed upon you, I mean, we don't say to babies, "You will walk at 9 months." right? There's a window there, right? Some babies walk at 9 months, other babies walk at 12 or 15 months. They all do it
Right.
on their own time. And that's something I would love for you to address, because I feel like as people are setting their goals, there's this desire to control the timing. We say, oh, well, what are your goals for 2019? And there's almost an assumption there that 12/31, or let's say 12/24, because we're going to take some time off over the holidays or whatever, the goal needs to be met. How do you work with kind of the fluidity of when the goal is actualized and setting it in the beginning, all under that umbrella of like, hey, let's not set ourselves up for failure?
Yeah. And Meredith, I'm going to go kind of in two shoots here. So the first one is I'm going to answer that question directly in the fact that it's really important, I think, both from a corporate organizational standpoint and from a personal standpoint, to have strategies and goals. So like a strategy for me that's longer term is that I want to cultivate a healthy relationship with my son, Zach, and his new wife, Alyssa, my new daughter. And so that's a strategy. That's something that is going to carry on, as far as I'm concerned, until the day I die.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I'm going to continue to put effort and energy into. So for the goal for this next 90 days would be to try to get together with them once a month and do something fun.
Mm-hmm.
It might look a little different in 2020. It might be to try to schedule a camping trip for a weekend. I don't know. I'm just kind of making those things up, but it's helping you get closer to that longer term strategy. And that's why I was saying, think back to what your mission is, and kind of what's important in your life, because that's then what will drive you with that. Same thing for an organization. Most of my experience has been that there are certain bigger term strategies that are developed by the executive team. And those strategies are kind of filtered down. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it's going to look different if part of it is, let's go financial, to create a new financial revenue stream. Well, in a training organization, I may not have a direct correlation to developing a product or a service. I may not have a direct correlation to selling that product or service. But my goal or objective for that year or for a couple of years is to train the people to learn and understand the process or the product or whatever it is, and train the people and equip them to do the job to then go out and sell that. Key component, and it wouldn't happen as successfully without that training, but it impacts the strategy, but it's not a direct correlation. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, totally. And I think as leaders, part of our responsibility is to help the people around us identify their contribution to that strategy, right? I think when people are on teams and they don't recognize where their contribution fits into the whole picture, it's really, really hard for people to then maintain motivation to accomplish that, because they're not getting the recognition. They're not seeing the value of what it is they're doing and where it fits in. And maybe, that applies to us as individuals as well.
Absolutely. And that was kind of my second offswing, in the fact that when you go do this for yourself, and I hope people do take the time to do this, and it doesn't take a ton of time. It's something you can kind of, I call it chew on, right, in your brain, and then sit down and actually write it out. But ultimately, it's really good if you're leading a team of people, or you have a business and you have a team of people helping you in your business, to take the time to meet with each person and say, where are you? What do you want? And it's not just about the business objectives, but how can we look at and maximize the last 90 days in 2019? Then, we are in business for a reason. So then narrowing it down to, let's look at the bigger impact. Why do we do what we do? As we look at any organization, it's figuring out that bigger picture so people see the vision. So to your point, then they're motivated, because motivation is really seeing the value in something, and they see the value in the job that they do. I watched this video the other day, actually on Facebook, and it was like ABC News, and this bus driver, is driving this busload of kids, and he has created this family and this team of people on the bus, and he gives roles and responsibilities to each person. And like one person welcomes any new people, the other one makes sure that the safety, he has like little roles for each one. And these kids, and I want to say they're maybe fourth, fifth grade up to like middle school age. And they talk about the impact he's made on their life and how much they enjoy the bus ride with him. And so it doesn't matter what role you have an opportunity to help people grow and move in the direction that they want to move into. And so in our world of how we judge jobs, it doesn't matter how big or how little a job seems, it makes an impact. And so looking at your bigger picture, there are multiple ways that you can accomplish that overarching mission in your life.
For sure. And so if you have someone that's getting caught up on timing, right, of like they're holding so tightly to a goal being delivered by a certain time frame, and then you get to the point where you kind of recognize, you're 2 weeks out or a month out and you've made progress, but you can tell you're not going to cross the finish line at the point you thought you were going to. Yeah. And people either step into like extraordinarily heroic activity to try to force the goal to happen, or maybe they kind of give up. So what's your thinking around, or what can you share with us around that time-bound component of goal setting? Because I think that's a tough one for a lot of people.
I think so too, Meredith. And I think I'm going to go back to Myers-Briggs. I think a little bit depends on your preference. There are some people like in a stair-step mode that the last letter for them is a J. And they prefer many deadlines and having kind of a step-by-step process, and that works for them. Part of that is reevaluating and realizing that you're not a failure if you don't have something done by a certain time. Now, there are some things that if a product's going to market, it needs the marketing behind it. It needs the safety regulations behind it. There are some locked-in deadlines that happen.
Sure.
But when it comes to personal development and growth too, that to me is a little bit different. But you're right, you have one or two choices to either go down and say, I give up, or to kill yourself trying to get it done. The P side of folks really like to wait until the last minute. A lot of times people call them procrastinators, which in fact, they're working on it, but they just haven't completed it yet. And they're kind of all over the place. And then bam, it's done when it's supposed to get done. Now, when I say it gets done when it's supposed to get done, I mean that in a loose way. I think you always have to reevaluate. There are certain external factors that will cause a project or cause something to change the time frame. It's important to understand that and see what those external factors are and not use them as an excuse, but how do you shift, have a locked in deadline that has to be done by that time, and or how do you then shift the date if need be. Now, the other piece that you have to observe, and you have to bend that lens of observation back to yourself, is are there some things you're doing to self-sabotage to not accomplish something because you're afraid of it? And that does happen, and to your point, you shouldn't beat yourself up about it, but it's really about learning that experience and realizing that, oh, aha, maybe this is happening because I'm scared of it. And so I'm, my thing is to keep busy. Well, if I'm busy doing stuff, well, I don't get what it is that I want accomplished, like to the point where I've started to block out time to work because I can squirrel away my time faster than anything. That then is an internal thing that I need to change versus the date. Does that make sense?
For sure. And I mean, I can recognize so many of those things in myself too. And so I don't think that, we're any different. And, as humans, I think we show up with those traits, and it's a matter of recognition and a willingness to, know that we're doing that and to make the changes that are necessary. So any other final thoughts around this concept of, really wrapping up 2019, diving into 2020, taking stock of where we are?
Yeah, just kind of to finish up that last thought really is about that when we bend that lens of observation, it's important sometimes to have somebody with an outside viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
meaning that we can be so close to it that we don't see that we're getting in our own way. And so it's important. I'm a firm believer. I have a business coach, even though I'm a business consultant and a coach. It's important to have those people to help you keep yourself accountable and also to provide observations that you may not see in yourself
Mm-hmm.
as well. And so just knowing, it goes back to a previous podcast that we had about receiving from other people and
Mm-hmm.
being open to receive that, because feedback really is a gift. So
Yes, absolutely. Well, if someone wanted to connect with you further on this topic or just any of the other work that you do, what's the best way for them to do that?
yeah, go out to my website. There's multiple ways to contact me, and my website shows you all of those different things at www.3v as in Victor consulting.com.
Awesome. Well, for this episode of Faith Infused Leadership, I'm your co-host Meredith Banka here with our host Debbie Heiser. We'll see you the next time.
See you later.